Welcome one, welcome all to the Blogging the Boys Roundtable podcast. No, I am not RJ Ochoa, and no, you don't need to adjust or refresh your browser. There are no problems on your end. I am Brandon Loree of the Writer's Block podcast, also a writer on Blogging the Boys, and I am filling in for RJ tonight as sort of the host. And if you think that I am not up to snuff for this responsibility, well, let me tell you, I do have a year's worth of experience being a retail manager of Kohl's department store in Hillsborough, New Jersey. So I'll set the record straight on that one. So as always, I do have a usual cast of characters here to help me lead the Cowboys discussion. I will start with Mr. Tony Catalina. Tony, you are going with the brick background again. I like it. You know, solid as a rock, solid as a brick. You are always my person to lean on when it comes to this stuff.
Except for now.
I don't know if I was cutting out. Yeah. So.
Except for now. Well, I'll turn
strong.
Yeah, exactly. And I'm going to turn to David Howman because, you are sometimes the cold, wet blanket when it comes to my Cowboys fandom. I saw this week you posted on the rumors about Aaron Rodgers going to New York, reminding Cowboys fans that the Cowboys cannot escape Aaron Rodgers if he goes to New York, as we will be facing him in 2023 if that happens. So your background is very fitting to your personality.
Well, thank you very much for that. I think, but yeah, Aaron Rodgers, he's kind of like Thanos. He's inevitable, and I just want to get rid of him at this point.
Love it. Yeah, we'll send him somewhere cold. This way he doesn't have to worry. I know it's, maybe just send him somewhere, anywhere but the NFC. Brandon Clements, you are the doppelganger to me, usually B1, B2. We don't have to worry about that tonight. But the Royal Rumble was this past weekend. I know you're a big WWE fan. What did you think about that?
It was a heck of a spectacle, and I wasn't surprised. I predicted both Royal Rumble winners, so it wasn't surprising. But again, it's one of the great shows of the wrestling year. And I was telling Howman during the week, I said, if that's one show you can watch a year, that's the one you want to watch because it's a lot of fun, and WWE did not disappoint.
Love it. Yeah, usually I'm trying to get back into wrestling, but it's a slow burn on that end. Mr. Danny Phantom, Dan Rogers, always good to have a elder statesman, somebody who's a little bit maybe wiser than the rest of the group here to kind of help guide things a little bit. Since I am not RJ, there are no preconceived notions about anybody on this roundtable tonight as opposed to who's going to be the winner. So maybe it plays in your favor a little bit.
Honestly, Brandon, I just kept wondering when you're talking about Kohl's. It's like, could you imagine RJ working there? He'd be like, last time we had T-shirts at this price was 1995. You know what else happened in 1995? So yeah, no, I'm glad to I'm glad to be here with all you guys, and it should be fun today.
Love it. Love tying it back into Cowboys. Like I mentioned before, if anybody's joining in right now, we have a couple questions about where is RJ. I'm filling in for him tonight, so no need to worry. RJ is still around, and actually, given the roundtable rules and how sacred this is for Blogging the Boys, he did send me the red book of all the rules I studied. I learned all the rules that RJ set forth with the roundtable, so it is a different host, but in this case, the rules remain the same. Not the biases, but the rules do. And we will start with talking about the coaching changes that have happened over the past week. Some coaches have been let go. Some coaches have been unrenewed of their contracts. But I think the big one, too, is the reaction to Kellen Moore being let go. And there was an emergency podcast that Danny was on along with Tom Ryle, Justin Varez, and RJ that you guys could go check out with all their reactions. But, Tony, I'll start with you. When it comes to Kellen Moore, the news that he was let go, now moving on to Los Angeles, what was your initial reaction to that?
I was frustrated a little bit because I look at the numbers, I dive into it, and I don't like the emotion of how the season ended kind of sway me, right? I understand that the Cowboys are in search for something, right? They're a little stagnant and everyone's little run stale with what Kellen Moore has brought to the table, but unless you can prove to me that like this is going to be substantially better and we've seen the numbers. You know what I mean? Like, I know it's not always about numbers, but like when you're ignoring the things that are factually in your face to prove or push a narrative about Kellen Moore, it was frustrating to say the least. Now, I'm not saying he's perfect. I'm not saying that the Cowboys, weren't without flaw while he was running the show. But now, there's some shoes to fill here. I think if it's Mike McCarthy or whatever they do, it's going to be a little bit of a challenge. And I hope I'm wrong. I hope that they come out and their offense is more explosive, more dynamic, and they find ways to be better. But I would say right now that's something they need to prove and show us moving forward.
Howman, for you, you're sort of the expert when it comes to the Mike McCarthy play calling, him taking over. What is your reaction to Mike McCarthy kind of taking control of that, if that does happen? Now, I know there were reports that the Dallas Morning News said that could happen, but it's nothing that's been confirmed and absolute as of right now. So what is your reaction to Mike McCarthy, the play caller, and something that we haven't seen yet?
Yeah, I mean, I think it might be the only way in which the Cowboys actually get an upgrade over Moore in terms of a play caller, because, I mean, I definitely thought Kellen Moore was a good offensive coordinator. He was not perfect. He had moments where maybe there was a better play he could have called in certain situations, or maybe he got away from what was working. But generally, that's something you can say for almost every play caller throughout the NFL. And I think he's someone who has a very sharp mind, very good scheme. And, the thing is with McCarthy, he comes in with that experience and he's been calling plays for a very long time. Granted, he hasn't done it for a while now, but when he did it at a very high level in Green Bay. So maybe he can make up for that kind of lack in experience and knowing, when you get stuck in these kind of situations, here's what you do. But at the same time, it's a huge gamble because you're moving on from a coordinator that had a success, and you're coming off consecutive seasons with 12 wins. You just won a playoff game. And also, both of those seasons in the playoffs, they ended against a 49ers defense that was really good both years. I mean, their defensive coordinator just got a head coaching job with the Houston Texans. So, that's how good he was that at such a young age, he gets to lead an NFL team. I don't think it's necessarily that the offense was suddenly bad. They just ran into a better team.
Brandon, Kevin brings up a great point here where he says that Mike McCarthy kind of calling the plays might just mean that this is his last chance and he wants to go out his way if that does happen. Do you think that this is really sort of Mike McCarthy's swan song, that, it seems like that there were rumblings before this season that, maybe he's going to be replaced, with people in-house. He proved to, again, get another 12-win season, everything's safe. But as of right now, with the things not leading to the NFC Championship, not leading to the Super Bowl, especially when your other team in your division is heading to the Super Bowl, do you think that this is sort of Mike McCarthy's way of saying, I'm just going to put everything I have into the season and call plays, and whatever happens, happens?
Yeah, I think it's very valid. I think at this point he's got to put all the chips on the table because I believe that the Cowboys are really a very close Super Bowl contender, as we saw this year and in the last 2 years, the 12-5 record. So he's definitely got to look over his shoulder, because don't be surprised if Dan Quinn is the guy that replaces him in 2024 if the chips fall where they may. That's just kind of where that's where things could go. But I could see Brian Schottenheimer. I've been hearing rumblings about him as well. Maybe they help. Schottenheimer's a good designer of plays, but if you team him up as the designer of plays with Mike McCarthy, calling them, and Mike McCarthy has proven in the past that he can do a really good job at that. I mean, he's done. He's got a pedigree of doing that. He also had Aaron Rodgers, but overall, I think this is for him. He's going to go out guns blazing. If he feels that he's kind of on that hot seat, which it seems like that way, you got to go all in and do what you need to do to it's like survive or you're gone. That's just kind of where it goes.
Danny, what about you? Do you think that the Cowboys are going to be hiring somebody from in-house and just kind of put somebody as like a assistant, to Mike McCarthy if he does call the plays, or do you think that they will go outside the building to bring somebody in to maybe help him along?
No, that's a good question. I don't really know. Part of this is because I'm not sure how much the Cowboys really wanted to move on from Kellen Moore, or if it became a situation where they just had to make a choice. And we heard, and I alluded to this on the emergency roundtable we had Sunday, but and then more information has come out too that there was some strife between McCarthy and Kellen and so I don't know if the plan is to just let McCarthy do things his way, and if that happens, I don't expect to see anybody of of any stature come in and call plays. That's where I would probably see if we had a Scott Tolzien or something. I'm thinking this is just McCarthy calling plays, or will they go a different direction? I don't know. I think it's I agree with what everybody said. This is a situation where we're just going to kind of hold our breath and hope for the best. I'm certainly not happy by this decision. You guys know how I feel about Kellen Moore, and but well, we'll see. I think we got to start trying to transition our minds into just trying to see what the Cowboys are thinking here and how this could work in a positive manner and focus on those kind of things. And that's what we got to do.
Yeah. And thank you for the super chat for Vance. Tony, he says, can't help but think if we ask our fellow Packers fans about this new development, what would they say? So if you kind of put your Packers fan cap on, we know that the end of the McCarthy era with Aaron Rodgers didn't really go so well. He went on this sabbatical of learning new offenses, innovating himself as a coach. And we haven't seen that yet. So do you think that he's going to be a new play caller in this situation? Do you think he's going to kind of transition to his old ways and just go with what's been comfortable and what he's used to as a play caller?
What I'm a little nervous was I like Mike McCarthy's old philosophy. I mean, he was a pass first coach that, set up the run with the pass a little bit, and he's had those West Coast principles. But what I'm nervous about is getting into Dallas and having that Jerry Jones, Stephen Jones kind of we run the ball and kind of changing the way that he runs things because of front office decisions or politics, whatever the case may be. I don't know if that'll be seriously a consideration or something that's really going to happen, but that's what's in the back of my mind because I think Mike McCarthy is a good offensive coach. I think Mike McCarthy is capable of calling a good game and he's had a track record. And if you ask Packers fans to answer Vance's question, I'm sure they're pro Aaron Rodgers and all the issues were Mike McCarthy's fault. And, it couldn't have possibly been Rodgers. But I think that the truth lies in the middle of there. And I think Mike McCarthy has earned the respect and the opportunity to lead his own unit, which a lot of people thought he was going to do when he first got here. But I'm sitting here saying I can't argue with the numbers. I know they were stagnant and stuff. So I still have a really high respect level for what Kellen Moore did here. And I just hope it continues and I'm wrong.
Howman, Danny alluded to sort of this conversation that kind of came out within the past few days about Albert Breer was on the Dan Patrick Show saying that he was hearing rumblings of Kellen Moore and McCarthy not getting along towards the end of the season, and that this was just a mutual parting of ways because Mike McCarthy does kind of want to take over. In this scenario, do you think that this played a factor into the Cowboys offense kind of sputtering a little bit down the stretch, or, what was the reason? Maybe it hurt Dak Prescott where maybe they were having conflicting ideas on how to run this offense. And maybe this is just for the better with not only for McCarthy, but also Dak's development moving forward too.
I mean, I think it's possible, but I think, when you talk about some of the offense's shortcomings this year, for me, I still come back to the fact that there just wasn't as much talent as there was last year. I mean, you trade away Amari Cooper, Michael Gallup, wasn't even ready for the start of the season. And even though he was playing, he didn't look like himself for almost the entire season. The offensive line was constantly shuffling. I think they had like 8 different combinations of guys playing along that line throughout the year. Dalton Schultz was in and out. Dak Prescott was in and out of the lineup. So I think that's probably where it mostly comes down to. But at the same time, when you're someone in Mike McCarthy, who his whole coaching career was based on how good he was as a play caller, he went to the 49ers as their offensive coordinator, and only just 1 year later, he got the Packers head coaching job. He did a great job as a play caller there, transitioning from Brett Favre to Aaron Rodgers almost seamlessly. He won a Super Bowl. He had a ton of success there. So then when you're in a new job and you're kind of, you've just had a year off and you're looking to kind of prove yourself in that situation and prove that you weren't just carried by Aaron Rodgers and you can be a real successful coach without him. And then you're watching somebody else do something, calling the offense. And when things don't go kind of right, it's almost like this feeling of, well, I can do better. I know what to do. So, when the losses pile up and, you lose to the 49ers consecutive years in the playoffs, I think that can just kind of boil over. And he probably got to this point, McCarthy did, of saying, I like Kellen Moore. He does things right. But at the same time, I know that I can make up for some of his deficiencies. Let's just do it my way.
And one of the people that were like rumblings of possibly replacing Mike McCarthy is no longer available. And that is the news coming out that Sean Payton is going to the Denver Broncos. Reportedly, it is for a first round pick and in 2023's draft, and then a 2024 second round pick. And then the New Orleans Saints get, or I'm sorry, the Denver Broncos get a third round pick next year in return. So, Brandon, I'll ask everybody to start, but Brandon, would you have made this trade for somebody like Sean Payton? Do you think that this is a lot of capital give up for a head coach, or does it make the difference that in the case for the Cowboys, maybe Sean Payton would be that next piece, maybe an end of the round, first round pick that would make that much of an impact for a possible Super Bowl trip?
I personally, I mean, I have a lot of respect for Payton. I know I've jokingly mentioned it, probably the first third of the season that I'd like to have Sean Payton as a head coach. But I think a first round pick and also a second round pick for a coach, I just don't think it's smart. I think, the reports that are coming out were that the Broncos really wanted DeMeco Ryans. They were sniffing around Coach Harbaugh from U of M, U of Michigan. And neither of those were, they fell through. And this seemed like a desperation play. The Saints had a number in mind of what they wanted, and the Broncos caved in. That was their third option. So when you're giving up a first and a second round pick for your, reportedly your third option, it's just not, it sounds to me like desperation. And if I'm glad the Cowboys didn't do it. I think with the Cowboys having a 12-5 record in back-to-back seasons, the Cowboys are just a few players away, in my opinion, from really taking it to the next level. And I don't want to lose a first and a second round pick because with folks like Will McClay in the building, we've been hitting on first and second round picks. And if they draft the positions of need, like I expect them to do, I think that take us further than giving up our future for a coach. I think Mike McCarthy's done well enough where I don't think we need to kick him out the door right now for a first and second round pick from another coach.
That's a great point. The Cowboys have had a lot of success, and they sort of make their money when it comes to draft time. And again, Kevin has a great point. Danny, I'll throw it to you. He's saying that the Cowboys already have somebody like a Sean Payton in the building with a Mike McCarthy having similar careers. So there's no sense in giving up all that capital for somebody you already have in the building. Do you agree with that the Cowboys already have sort of like a Sean Payton in a Mike McCarthy?
No, I don't agree with that. I think that they're a little different. I mean, I would not make the trade to answer that question too, for the reasons that Brandon said too. And I'm a big, I love draft capital, and the Cowboys do a great job with their draft picks. So no, that's too steep. And you never know with what you're going to get with another coach. And also too, and I don't want to put too much pressure on McCarthy or too much blame or credit. Is you're only as good as your staff too. And so it's not just like Sean Payton would come in there and have all the answers there for him. He needs to have assistant coaches that do well. He needs to have a quarterback that plays well. He needs to have talent around him, just like McCarthy needs. So to me, no, it's almost like the sense of like Kellen Moore. It's like you're going to get rid of that and hopefully you can get the small amount of people that maybe could be better. And that's where I would just, and if you're talking draft picks, absolutely not. I mean, the other thing about this too is that if McCarthy does not do well, I think we have another person that's would make a great head coach that could slide right in there, with Dan Quinn, which is what I see happening. I think I almost feel like they're scripting it. This is what's going on. It's going to be Dan Quinn. Let's just let McCarthy do what he wants this next year and see what happens. I mean, it's almost like you're free rolling. If it doesn't work out, you got Quinn. If it does, great. Then, keep McCarthy around. But no, I would not trade draft picks for Sean Payton. And honestly, I'm glad this is over so we don't have to, deal with this, talk anymore.
Tony, you're nodding your head along. What are your thoughts on this? Would you have made the similar move, or you think just, keep everything the way it is? And if Mike McCarthy is out in 2024, there's going to be somebody else available.
Now, I think this is, I'm grateful for the fact that it's over. The saga's done, because for me, it was Mike McCarthy and I couldn't believe it, honestly. I mean, I shouldn't be, surprised by Cowboys Nation and the conversations that take place on the national stage with this team. But a coach to go 12-5 back-to-back years, be, playoffs both times, one time a division winner, and we're sitting here, is Sean Payton going to take his job? And it's just like, to me, it was just too much. I'm glad that that's over with. We don't got to deal with that. But the draft compensation to me is crazy. I mean, now you're going to turn around and say, go ahead and make it work in the draft. Go ahead and find, talent and do that. But it's like, all right, well, we're already giving up draft capital to get you here, so you're the first round pick. So for me, it's an unprecedented thing. It doesn't happen too often. And I think there's a reason for that, and I'm just glad the Cowboys weren't the ones that made that choice.
Howman, Omar brings up a good point with that. Right now, there's a lot of shuffling other positions to worry about on the offensive side of the ball. And while the Cowboys don't really have an offensive coordinator, all the Sean Payton talk, they still have things to resolve in-house with filling out a running back coach position, an offensive line coach position. Now that Kellen Moore is sort of out of the building, regardless of if they fill the offensive coordinator first and then the cast of characters on the offense second, do you think that, in your opinion, like what will be first? Do you think it's going to be the offensive line coach, running back coach, and then offensive coordinator? Or do you think Mike McCarthy will kind of promote within or anything else at offensive coordinator and then figure out everything else afterwards?
Well, I would probably imagine that they'll kind of figure out the offensive coordinator role first, especially just because the Cowboys have already started the interview process for that, interviewing Panthers running backs coach Jeff Nixon earlier today. So just based off the moves that they've made so far, it looks like that's probably the direction that they're going to go. But I mean, I think especially with those two positions, the offensive line is kind of in a weird situation because they had some good this past season, but they also were not necessarily as good as they could have been. And they've got some things up in the air with Connor McGovern's pending free agency. Terrence Steele also technically will be a pending free agent, although he's a restricted free agent. And he's also coming back from that injury. And then with the running back room, what are they going to do with Zeke? Are they going to get a pay cut with him? Or are they going to cut him outright? Tony Pollard, also his rookie deal's coming up. So I'm very curious to see what direction they go with those two assistant coach roles. And I think that it's very possible that it could actually tell us more about the future of this offense than the offensive coordinator position, if indeed it's true that McCarthy is going to call the plays again.
So tying in, kind of putting a bow on the coaching decisions as of right now, we don't know the rest of the staff, where it stands. I'll ask the panel here of where you kind of compare the coordinators for 2022 to what's going to be in 2023. And again, with the assumption that Mike McCarthy is going to be calling plays. So Danny, I'll start with you. Which is your better combination, Quinn and McCarthy or Quinn and Kellen Moore?
Oh, Quinn and Kellen Moore. And I just real quickly, I won't spend a lot of time on this too. Is I agree that Mike McCarthy was a good offensive coordinator, but I really think, and I went back and I looked at this. It was like, why were they so terrible? In McCarthy's last years, and honestly, I just saw a lot of the same things. And I saw an offensive line that got away with holding a lot. I saw Aaron Rodgers having a lot of time, and I saw Aaron Rodgers being really good. I mean, he was throwing precision, throws to, and he had Devontae Adams back into it. That didn't hurt, but honestly, there's just, and then sometimes they were playing from behind a lot too. So it was just everything about that's like, I don't want any of that in Dallas, because I don't think the Cowboys can duplicate that kind of thing. And so that's what makes me. I bet you if you were poll Packer fans, their answer would be like, good riddance that he was gone. And we saw that Green Bay had success, immediately right after he's gone too. So to me, I don't know. It's such a wild card, that. I don't know what it's going to be like, but I just don't think the odds are in our favor that it's going to be better.
Clements, B1, what about you? Quinn and McCarthy, the potential of what we will see from McCarthy if this happens, or would you have preferred to just keep it as Kellen Moore and Dan Quinn? You might be muted, or you might be lagging way behind. Potentially. Howman, I'll throw it to you
definitely,
first.
I agree with Dan this. I think you got to keep it Quinn and Moore. I think that's just the way to go. And I think McCarthy should just focus on managing his players, managing the game.
Well, it looks like that Brandon, he mentioned that he hardwired before, and maybe he's going off of what Tony had originally. Tony, maybe you gave him the bad juju. I'll throw it to you, Tony. Which combination are you going with?
Yeah, there's an internet bug going around apparently, but for the originally, I mean, I'm gonna lean Kellen Moore. I think I've been safe on that, but I'm gonna give the grace Mike McCarthy to get a chance, right? I mean, this was a few years ago that he was calling plays. It's he may be innovative, he may have go back to his principles, whatever worked. So it's too early to say, right? We could be having this conversation a year from now in a totally different tune, and Mike McCarthy could either had a great offensive year or he could be out, right? I think it's that spectrum of possibilities with Mike McCarthy. So right now I'll lean Kellen Moore, but me and Danny are pretty much in lockstep with this right now.
Brandon, I think we have you back. It seems like what we were saying, the bug of this lag and live stream thing is going around and it hit your computer. I'll let you finish up with what you were talking about with this.
Yeah, so thank you. I don't know, the internet gremlins always get me. Apparently, I thought I got the new internet set up, of course. So I'll have to call my provider and get that figured out. But yeah, what I was saying before is I agree with Danny. I think Quinn Moore is just the way to go, and I just want McCarthy to just focus on the game management side of things, coach up their areas, and that's the way it should be.
Love it. Summarizing, Quinn and Kellen Moore is the favorite. Howman, I'm going to put you on the spot to put your stamp on this now, just like you did with Leighton Vander Esch. I want you to say right now, definitively, is Mike McCarthy going to be a great play caller in 2023? Yes or no?
Absolutely, yes. I have no question about that because we've seen him in the past and he's been a great play caller all throughout his time in Green Bay. And to Danny's point, where he's talking about, the Packers offense wasn't that good, towards the end of his time there. Remember, his last season, he didn't coach the entire season. He was fired halfway through the year. The year before that, 2017, Aaron Rodgers was out half the year. The year before that, they were top 5 in almost every category across the board. And then the year before that, he gave up play calling duties, and it didn't turn out so well for Green Bay, and he took it back. So, if we're looking at those last few years with Green Bay, of course, Packers fans are going to say that they're happy that they got rid of him, but Cowboys fans are happy they got rid of Kellen Moore, and it doesn't seem like any of us think that that's the appropriate response either. So I just think McCarthy has a very long resume. He has a whole lot of proof that he's a good play caller, that he can elevate players, and everyone talks about how great Aaron Rodgers is, but his only head coach for a very long time in his career was Mike McCarthy. And Mike McCarthy was there to develop him, to bring him up through the league, and he turned him into a great player. Not saying that Rodgers doesn't deserve any credit for it, but McCarthy doesn't get nearly enough credit for what he did there. So I've been a big supporter of Kellen Moore. A couple days before they decided to move on from him, I wrote an article on bloggingtheboys.com where I said that it would be a mistake to move on from him. That said, I do believe in McCarthy. I believe in the fact that throughout his career, he has been a pass-happy play caller. He's, his time in Green Bay, he led the league in early down pass rate. He made things easier for his quarterback. And I think that if we get through a year of him calling plays and the Cowboys are still slamming their running backs' heads into a brick wall on first down and setting themselves up into really hard to convert third and longs, then that'll be an even bigger problem because it'll turn out that maybe it's not Kellen Moore, maybe it's not Mike McCarthy, maybe it's not Scott Linehan, maybe the call is coming from inside the house. And that would be much worse than any other scenario that we could think of.
Love the shameless plug for the article. And again, if anybody is joining just newly to the Roundtable, all these guys here, including myself, we throw up content on bloggingtheboys.com daily. And with writers, we also like to hand out awards. We also like to put our stamp, our opinion out there in the universe on what was a successful season. And now we're going to be doing a sort of BTB honors segment to kind of wrap up the 2022 season, hand out some hardware to the Dallas Cowboys of what was the 2022 season. So we're going to go around with a few categories. This is really where the points matter. This is what RJ said. The second segment is always the most important. So I'm going to put the spotlight on Danny. Danny, I want you to tell me who has the brightest future that you saw from this season, giving out the brightest future award in your opinion.
So for me, I'm going to go with one of my favorites. And, I've talked about him quite a bit this year and even last year. My brightest future is going to actually go with our right tackle, Terrence Steele. I thought that what he did this year was, nothing short of fantastic. I I thought you saw some real growth from year 2 to year 3. That guy is super quick off the snap. He's nimble. He's strong. His consistency this season has been top notch. He's constantly getting in good position. I mean, there's no leaning anymore with this guy. He's corrected some of the things that he struggled with before. He's one of the top run blockers in the league, and obviously, you know, the biggest thing is you could see the impact that, you know, when he was not with the team. So my brightest future is going to be our next All-Pro tackle, eventual All-Pro tackle, Terrence Steele.
That's a big claim. I like it. And you said it, you know, exactly how I feel, is that the running game did lack once he left the lineup. And I know he's a restricted free agent, so the Cowboys have his rights, can retain it. I know that they were rumblings of trying to re-sign him sort of during the bye week, you know, beforehand. Hopefully they can get that done sooner rather than later. Tony, what about you? Who do you have as your brightest future award?
Yeah, I mean, actually, the fact that I actually had to think about this a little bit is encouraging for the future, because there's a couple of ways I could have went, but I'm going to go on the other side, and I'm going to say Tyler Smith. I mean, I was one of his, I wouldn't say detractors, but definitely somebody that I was like, oh man, this guy doesn't give me the most confidence in him, right? Especially coming out the gate week 1, starting left tackle, when he practiced all pretty much training camp at left guard. So, he proved a lot of people wrong. Now, obviously, he got his lumps and his growing pains this year, but I think the fact that we're sitting here, and it tells you a lot of how Tyron Smith handled the situations. Like, I'll go to right tackle. Let's keep him here. Let's keep that continuity going. I think the sky is the limit now for Tyler Smith. Everything you hear about in the locker room is that this kid is, you know, he puts his head down. He works hard. He understands it mentally. He's a physical specimen, obviously. So Tyler Smith is one of those guys that the Cowboys can kind of plug and play moving forward. And you feel really good about the Cowboys because they stood on their convictions. A lot of people, including myself, were like, man, I don't like this pick. I'm not really in on this pick. And they were just like, shut up and let us cook.
Thank you to Watsamata for the super chat. Tony, I'll throw it to you, because sort of like Kellen Moore being involved with the offense, I know offensive line coach, those need to be meshed. Those need to be paired. Do you think that if Mike McCarthy's designing a better offense, you will see a jump in play from somebody like a Tyler Smith, a Terrence Steele next season?
I think all things are on the table, right? I think that we're going to see something that, you know, this Kellen Moore offense, like I said, I've enjoyed it. I think that it's showed real, you know, production in his 4 years calling the show, but it's going to be a refreshing look, whether that's a positive refresh or a negative refresh. Then we'll see what that happens. I have confidence in the fact that Mike McCarthy is going to give us things we just haven't seen. And I think that's encouraging. Those West Coast principles, some of those different, you know, pass schemes and stuff of that nature. I'm really excited to see it, but also, yeah, I think that we're going to see offense and different guys being used in a multitude of ways.
Shout out to Skylar for the beard gang. Everybody gets a point. I do get points for that. I see Danny has a little bit of a mustache, so we'll throw that in there as well too. Howman, who's your brightest future award? Who do you got?
My brightest future was actually pretty easy for me. It was Sam Williams, and you know, he's a guy that consistently every single week was flashing in one way or another. He finished with 22 pressures on the season, which was 6 on the team, and he hardly ever played. And I mean, I understand why he wasn't playing that much. All these other edge rushers were absolutely dominating. But he came in, and it wasn't just as a pass rusher too. He was making plays in the backfield as a run stopper. He just has that explosiveness. He gets upfield, he disrupts. And, you know, every time that I watched him and really just like focused on what Sam Williams was doing when he was on the field, I just kept thinking, once this guy is playing significant snaps going forward, he's going to be a real problem. And when you factor in that you've got Micah Parsons, you know, he's only entering his 3rd year. You're going to have Sam Williams coming in. DeMarcus Lawrence is still there as well. Dorrance Armstrong just signed. You know, this is a pretty stacked edge rushing group, and I was really impressed with what I saw out of Sam Williams.
I think it's a great point, because I think it also ties in with someone like bringing back a Dan Quinn and how important he is to developing these young guys. And, you know, this is somebody that he drafted, that he went down to Ole Miss to work out. Like, this was his guy. And if he left, maybe that development doesn't take place in year 2, maybe under a new system. So if you can see the tea leaves of what he can do with Micah Parsons from year 1 to year 2, I think you can exactly see the same thing for Sam Williams the next season. Brandon, we share the namesake here. Maybe you got my guy. Mine hasn't been mentioned yet, so maybe you'll take it from me. But who do you have as your brightest future?
Well, since I had to drop out for a second there with the internet, did anyone pick Deron Bland? I just wanted to double check.
No, you're good on that one.
All right, cool. Because Deron Bland's my guy. I mean, he played 17 games this year. He started 8, 7 pass defended, 54 combined tackles, 5 interceptions, by the way, which he's actually, they ranked inside the top 5 in the league, and actually one away from being tied for first in the league, and that's pretty darn good. And then he's proven to play inside and outside. He's a very physical corner. I love when he comes in and he can stop the run too. I love when there's short passes or runs to the outside. He's not afraid to stick his neck out there and just make some great plays. And he to me, I think the Cowboys, they hit a home run with a 5th round pick out of Fresno State. This kid, to me, you could put him on the opposite side of Diggs, and I think that's going to be a very dynamic duo going forward. And I'm excited to see how he's gonna develop going forward. But his future, to me, the sky's the limit. I think having Diggs and Bland together is going to be really nice. And if depending on how the Cowboys draft, I think getting an extra corner or 2 in the draft would be helpful. But those 2, I think that's going to be good. And Bland is just the kid's a stud. I think he could eventually be the number one corner on this team. And I love Diggs. I just love Bland. I think Bland just does everything that you want. He's going to make some mistakes here and there because he's still a little young, but I love his aggressiveness. I just think he's the total package, and I think the sky's the limit for this kid.
I think you bring up a great point on how that it also opens up the possibility for the Cowboys not to draft a cornerback right away at pick 1 if they really don't want to. They do have Jordan Lewis still on the roster. They could possibly re-sign an Anthony Brown, but Bland showed this flexibility of inside and outside, so I think that bodes well for his development. We're going to go to the next award. I liked all the answers. Maybe some were a little bit better than others. Yeah, Danny.
No, I just want to before you wrap a bow on this, I just wanted to say that if you listen to all these answers here, which by the way, were all fantastic answers, I think that kind of speaks to just why we wouldn't want to do the Sean Payton thing, because look at what you'd be giving up, because these are some great, all of these players mentioned could be all Pro Bowlers, coming up, and they have great seasons and flash some great potential. So I just wanted to make that point before moving on.
That's a great point. He just got some points. Howman, what do you got?
Yeah, I just wanted to add to what Brandon was saying about how great Deron Bland is. He mentioned he came out of Fresno State. He also transferred to Fresno State from Sacramento State. He was playing in the FCS, a year and a half ago, and he was playing so great at that level. Then he went to not even a Power 5 conference school and played great. And now he comes to the NFL level and right away just plays up to that level. So it's really, really impressive when you think about what his path was coming here.
Tony, we'll go with the next one. Biggest surprise. Who do you have as the biggest surprise on the roster for 2022?
It's tough. I don't want to double up answers, so I won't do it. But I think Tyler Smith to me was one of my biggest surprises. But I'm gonna say Deron Bland. To be honest with you, I think he was the biggest. Being a 5th round guy, played in the NFL PA Collegiate Bowl, and we're in the draft coverage now. And when you tear it up, you say, okay, Senior Bowl is the higher prospects, then it goes to East-West Shrine game, and then you're in the Collegiate Bowl. And so for him to be in that game, and like Howman said, to play FCS level, then to move up and not even be in a Power 5, and then step in and just okay, we're gonna put you on the outside. Now we're gonna move you inside, and now you're gonna be in the playoffs, and you're gonna be going up against Aaron Rodgers. And for him to answer the bell, didn't look like he was ever scared of the moment. It was, took it aggressively. And for me, a surprise is it's not the right word. I'm more so pleasantly surprised, because he just stepped up, he made plays, and he's just somebody that, you hit on a 5th round pick. This guy is going to be here for a while. They're going to, he's going to be inserted. I don't know if he's going to Wally Pip Jordan Lewis inside or if they're, if they're going to move him outside permanently, but either way, he's going to be a fixture in this defense for quite some time.
Like my co-host Jess Navarez always says, Bland is anything but. I don't know if she trademarked that as putting on t-shirts, making millions of dollars, and I don't know about it. She's not going to share the funds with me, but that's okay. We'll talk about that off air. Howman, for you, who's your biggest surprise?
3 words: Leighton Vander Esch.
Love it. What a pivot.
I couldn't go anywhere else for this honor. And Leighton Vander Esch really, he proved me wrong. I infamously picked him as a surprise roster cut back in the offseason. And, he had kind of had some struggles a little bit, not really reaching the high level that his rookie year was. But this year, I mean, he really, even the people who believed in him and thought that like he could still be that guy, I don't think that they thought he was going to have this kind of year. He came in and was just such a fortifying presence for that defense. And we even saw towards the end of the year when he missed those last few games. I mean, the run defense especially just looked completely different. And it was just a different unit without him. And then, he comes back for that playoff game, and remember like how great they were playing against Tom Brady. They made him look just, horrible. And a lot of that was Van Der Esch. I mean, even in coverage, he was going out there and he was contesting passes, at the catch point. And, then the next week, people forget the 49ers, their offense was not really playing that well. Most of it was their defense stepped up. And, Leighton Van Der Esch was really a huge part of that defense and being able to make them play at such an elite level. So I got to give him his flowers.
Watsamata brings up another award that we'll hand out because I know we've touched on big surprises, sort of rookie of the year, brightest future type thing. Danny, I'll throw this one to you. We've talked about this as maybe there are some players that sort of were like the biggest disappointment. So who do you have as sort of somebody that just didn't meet your expectations of what you thought could be for 2022?
So you're asking me my disappointment?
Yes.
Okay, well, you know what? I was kind of hoping not to really. I was hoping somebody else would say this so I wouldn't have to. But honestly, if we're judging by where my expectations were, I'm honestly going to say I'm making Dak Prescott my disappointment pick. I know. In my opinion, I really think we had a real chance, and I think the table was set. If you look at all the things that we had going for us, I think the opportunity was there. We had one of the best Ds that we've had in a long time. We had Cooper Rush come in for those 5 games, and I mean, you don't get opportunities where your backup can preserve your season. And, we played some tough teams too. If you remember, we played one of them's in the Super Bowl. The other was in the conference. I mean, another one's in the playoffs. So it's not like we just, just skated by. Honestly, I just thought that, it was a great opportunity. When Dak was on, I thought the team was unbeatable. To see them falter down the stretch, it was just a really tough pill to swallow. Do I think he's a great quarterback? Absolutely, I do. But he wasn't great down the stretch. And at times he was really bad. And those things will just take the wheels right out from underneath you. So, and that's what happened. So to me, as much as I hate to say it, I love Dak, and I don't want to feel any of the Dak hate or like we should move on from Dak because all that is stupid. But I'm disappointed. I mean, he's a better player than what he delivered, and I think that hurt us. And I think it leaves us kind of like wondering what we need to do. And it just, it doesn't need to be that way because just Dak needs to just be better.
I think it's also a good point too with the health of Dak. Like we have this expectation that he's trying to be an Iron Man, that he has shown health to be a quality starter throughout 16, 17 games. And unfortunately it hasn't been the case. So that is also another thing, could be a disappointment that he was exiting early in the season. Kevin brings up a name, and James Washington unfortunately didn't really meet expectations on that. Danny, you're getting 5 points. So that's good. So people do agree that Dak wasn't, unfortunately, and, unfortunately now you just lost the 5 points. So I do understand your point and where you're coming from that. Brandon, I will throw it to you. Who do you have as your sort of bigger disappointment?
It's not really a who, it's kind of a what. And that's the receiving group aside from CeeDee Lamb. It was just, this year it was, we were wondering, okay, is CeeDee Lamb going to be, is he a true number 1 receiver? Is he going to be able to, to take over that spot because Amari Cooper, that whole situation. We had to hear about that so much after the trade happened. And guess what? He did. CeeDee Lamb lived up to his end of the bargain, and he just absolutely had a dominant year. He's just on a different level. But the issue was when you have Dalton Schultz and Noah Brown as your 2 next options, I'm a little nervous. And just for perspective, CeeDee Lamb had 156 targets this year. The next receiver, I'll skip Schultz because Schultz had 89 targets, but the next highest targets was tied for Gallup, he was out for the first part of the year, and then you have Noah Brown. That's kind of scary. That reared its ugly head, especially against the Niners. I know the Niners have a great team, and they had a great defense led by DeMeco Ryans, who obviously is going to be he's going to be a great head coach in this league, I feel like. But that to me, that's the Achilles heel for this team this year. I think that's going to be something they have to target. In the draft, I would say if they could go first, second round, I would ideally love to see a receiver go early. I've seen guys like Zay Flowers. I think that's a guy that I'd like to see out of Boston College. I watched him a little bit. Being a Syracuse fan, I follow him. I followed a lot of those teams. So it's going to be. They need if they can get the receiving group back on track and have some more weapons that can kind of scare defenses. That's going to open things up for the rest of the offense. And I know, and I agree with Danny as well. I think you can a lot of blame could go to Dak because this team was built to do what they were supposed to do, and they won 12 games this year. But unfortunately, that whole situation where we didn't have we had less than stellar receivers aside from CeeDee Lamb, it reared its ugly head. And unfortunately, I don't like to say this because I'm a huge Dak fan. I support the guy, but to me, he just at this point, I'm just kind of concerned that he can't win it, essentially with the lack of options. I feel like they need to build it around him and have better playmaking options. That's kind of where I am with Dak. I still think Dak can, do some big things, but I think with the lack of pass catching options, that hurt Dak. And I felt like I don't think he could have carried the team on his back as much as we have hoped.
Trey brings up a great point. I think we can all say that the biggest disappointment was 3 weeks of constant OBJ talk. Who knows? Maybe that'll come back up in free agency, and we'll have to live that all over again. We'll move on to the next award because we're getting close on time here. I want to go with comeback player of the year, and I think this is important when we're talking about where expectations were. We were a little bit on the downside, but somebody who just totally came out of nowhere, just had maybe a down year in 2021, came back and was excellent. Howman, who do you have as your sort of comeback player of the year?
I mean, I don't know if it necessarily fits as far as like had a down year last year, but maybe didn't get kind of the recognition that he deserves, and that's center Tyler Biadasz. I thought that he came in and just absolutely played out of his mind all season from start to finish. I think he got a lot of criticism last year because his first 2 games of the year were against Vita Vea and then Javon Hargrave of the Philadelphia Eagles, and those are 2 really, really tough assignments to go up against. And I think most centers throughout the NFL would have a tough time with that, like he did in those games. But he played well to end last year, and then this year I thought he just took it up another level. He actually gave up the fewest pressures of any of the Cowboys offensive linemen that played like a significant amount of snaps. I know they had quite a bit of rotation there, but as far as the guys that were obviously a core part of that line, he was actually gave up fewer pressures than even Zach Martin, which is an impressive feat. He was a great run blocker all season long. I think part of the problem in that Washington game when he didn't play, the Cowboys suddenly couldn't run the ball at all. Part of that is obviously Terrence Steele not being in there, but also not having Tyler Biadasz there. And I think that, the center position is no longer something that people have to talk about, have to worry about. Like, what are they going to do now that Travis Frederick's retired? And I just think Biadasz really stepped it up, and he got a Pro Bowl out of it. So congrats to him.
Yeah, 8th Cowboy that got a Pro Bowl nomination this season. That's pretty impressive. Again, we're talking about the future of the Cowboys, but the current vets that they have, again, this is a stacked roster that when we're talking about expectations and maybe disappointments, maybe, again, the season could have been, we're playing the what if game as the Eagles move on to the Super Bowl, which is totally upsetting. Tony, for you, who do you have as your comeback player of the year?
Yeah, this is Howman's guy, in my opinion. I saw a couple of comments on it, and I do think it's Leighton Vander Esch. And the reason why I say that is because, heading into the offseason, I think, he obviously didn't get his 5th-year option picked up. So his future in Dallas was very much in question heading into last offseason. I think a lot of people were saying that linebacker, they needed to find something at the position, right? I think they brought in Anthony Barr. They're hoping that Jabril Cox could take a step and just, the way they were going to use Micah Parsons, right? But ultimately, the market for Leighton Vander Esch wasn't that robust. I don't think the expectations coming into the season was all that big. I mean, we even had Howman, my guy, who's, has, analytical and is really well thought out takes, had him as somebody who didn't make the roster. So for him to come in and just be such a pivotal point in this defense where you really felt him when he was out, when he wasn't in that game, and obviously the combination of him and Hankins being out really hurt the run defense there. But coming in, you saw him making plays in that Tampa Bay Buccaneers wild card game, and I just think that Leighton Vander Esch is one of those guys that he was he's just one of those guys that like you just didn't know what to expect, right? You were hoping like he's going to bring a veteran presence. You'd hope that he'd come out there and be steady and be able to stay on the field. But I think he was everything of every bit of that and more, to be honest.
It's a great point. And, while you had the opportunity to beat down Howman, maybe take some points away, you decided to uplift him and say that he has great analytical takes. So, again, I think he appreciates that. I appreciate that. I wrote down some points for you as well. So good job on your end. Danny, before we move on to the next category, what's your comeback player of the year?
Yeah, well, I'm not going to take a shot at Howman and again reiterate that he left Leighton Vander Esch off the roster prediction. But I will, take a shot at myself and how I undervalued what kind of player that Donovan Wilson is. And to me, I saw a lot of really great improvements with Dono this year. I mean, don't get me wrong. To me, I felt like Dono's a splashy player, but I think he's hit and miss a lot of times. At least his first few years, there's a lot of plays that he was part of that historically bad defense where it looked like he was on roller skates too when he doesn't change direction well. But I want to say this, I think he's this could go to Dan Quinn because the way that he's utilized him. I mean, he's made him a downhill player, and Dono has just been so splashy this year. It's just, I mean, he's does a really good job making his decisions. He brings a lot of pop when he hits, just a lot smarter overall, I think. And so to me, I just definitely want to give Donovan Wilson props because he was a guy I didn't have rated very high coming into the season, but I think he's, he was kind of had a little bit of Pro Bowl buzz at one point this year. So definitely he gets my biggest, improvement player.
Tony, what do you got?
So, I mean, we rib Howman for the LVE take. If we run back the 1st and 10 podcast, I'll tell you right now, we did who's our surprising cuts, and mine was Donovan Wilson. So I was absolutely wrong. 100%. I own that. And so if we're gonna send shots, I gotta be able to take them too. So I was dead wrong about that in the preseason.
Wow, that's worse than mine, Tony. That's horrible.
Yeah, bury me.
You know what? It's a cleansing podcast. As we're, like I said to Jess, sometimes you have to use these opportunities as therapy. To sort of like the airing of grievances to Seinfeld and Festivus and all that stuff. Brandon, before we move on, I think, Donovan Wilson is a free agent. It's somebody that maybe the Cowboys can bring back. He definitely upped his market as far as a safety and somebody, that will possibly get some money in free agency. Do you think Dan Quinn being back in Dallas really kind of shifts the scale in their favor to bring somebody like Wilson back? Or do you think he's just gone no matter what?
No, I think it definitely tips the scale. I think as Danny said, I think Dan Quinn implementing him using him the best way possible is made Donovan Wilson the best player that he's ever been in the NFL. So I think a combination of those two things, I think it's a match made in heaven, and I do think Donovan Wilson will remain a Cowboy, and I hope he remains a Cowboy because when he's used effectively, and he's essentially like he likes to be in that box, he likes to go downhill, like Danny said, and just lay the wood. That's the kind of guy I like on the team. He's a tone setter. He's the kind of defender that I like. Real quick, the comeback player that I have really quick is Damone Clark. He wasn't even supposed to play this year.
Yep.
I mean, he was supposed to take a redshirt year, another 5th round pick to the Cowboys. I feel like they're going to hit on him. I think Clark's got a lot of tools. He played in 10 games after everybody thought it was going to be a redshirt year. So I think the sky's the limit for Damone Clark. I think that to me was the easy comeback player of the year for me.
That's who I had written down. So again, the namesake, we're on the same wave path here. And again, talking about defenders and everything, I think now the conversation is defensive player of the year. And again, there are certain nuances to it. We're going to get to the big award at the very end. But Tony, we already talked about Donovan Wilson, a couple defenders. Do you have somebody different for your defensive player of the year?
You sent me a layup here. I mean, this is a slam dunk. I mean, I got to take it. I'm wearing his sweatshirt. Micah Parsons, easy pick for me. This kid is a freak. He's a stud. Anybody who went first, it was just easy. So Micah Parsons, he's a generational talent. I know they use that word pretty loosely nowadays, but for him, I feel comfortable saying it. When you get Lawrence Taylor comparisons, whether it's accurate or not, you got to talk about him in that tone. The way they scheme up and the way they attack, and some of the things that just on a personal level that I saw from Micah Parsons that really wowed me was some people would like to go on the right side and play against the right tackle that they know they could probably beat. This guy's looking to go against Andrew Thomas. He's looking to go against Trent Williams. He wants to go best on best, and he wants to do iron sharp iron. So the guy with that mentality, that kind of just dog in him, and for him, it's a no-brainer. The Cowboys are not the same unit whenever Mike Parsons is not out there. And every time he got banged up, nicked up, you always kind of held your breath because you knew things were going to change in a blink of an eye if he wasn't out there.
Danny, for you, is this a chalk award? Do we have to, talk about Micah Parsons again, or do you have somebody different you want to save him possibly for later?
Well, I can't believe you guys are sleeping on, Kelvin Joseph. I mean, if you look at what he's done, why are we even answer? There's no other answer. We're done with this. I mean, I'll just reiterate that, he just changes the way that teams have to game plan. And to me, I think he's kind of a little bit like Tank on Flocka. I think he brings that same, tenacity, or he gives you that same kind of, you forget about his value, but he brings that extra tenacity that, on every play. And it's unfortunate because he was really killing it early. And I do think he started to wear down toward the end. And, it was tough. But I mean, honestly, Micah is just fantastic.
Howman, is this something that, you're going to see in the future, that when we do this over and over again, when, RJ's doing this, stealing my idea for this show topic, do you think that Micah Parsons is just going to be hands down defensive player of the year moving forward?
I sure hope so. I really hope that he's able to keep up this level of dominance. And, I remember after last season, how special his rookie year was. I was one of the people kind of cautioning, like, maybe he'll, kind of regress towards the average a little bit. And no, he completely blew all those expectations out of the water. I think he's the defensive player of the year for the Cowboys. I think he's the defensive player of the year for the entire league. And frankly, I lose my mind every time people say that, Nick Bosa is the shoe-in for the award, because, Parsons played on, much less snaps than Bosa did. He tied him for pressures. He had a higher sack rate. He had a higher pass rush win rate. If you average it out to where they were equal on their actual amount of play time, Parsons was better. He was more disruptive. He was better in every way. He's more versatile. And I mean, simply put, Bosa's a really good pass rusher, but Micah does things he couldn't even dream of. So, it's pretty easy in my eyes.
Man, you're just throwing out all those shots tonight. I love it. Love it. Brandon, do you share the same sentiment as Howman? You're saying that he's defensive player of the year. Bosa who?
Yeah, chalk, baby. But I'll add one last piece to it, because the boys already named everything I could even come up with about Micah Parsons. I mean, the unicorn is just the unicorn. And here's a fact: 80% of the games he plays in, he records a sack. That's in the top 6 in NFL history. I know he's only been in the league for 2 years, but 80% of games he plays in, he's getting at least one sack. That just tells you he's a once in a generation kind of player. And the unicorn is going to be the guy, barring anything crazy. He's going to be our defensive player of the year for the Cowboys for many years to come. And I wouldn't be surprised if he wins himself an MVP down the line. He's just that darn good. He's a once a generation type talent. And I'm just glad we made that trade back. Slid back 2 spots with the Eagles to get him and still get a 3rd round pick out of it. So I'm very happy about that.
When you started talking about unicorns and what this stat was going to be, I thought you were going to say 80% of unicorns and you're going to give some mythical stat. But still, I mean, I guess, again, he's a generational player, so I guess it goes hand in hand. This one is a little up for debate, and I kind of like maybe we have a little bit of different answers. Danny, I'll start with you. For offensive player of the year, there are a few directions you can go. Who are you going with?
Yeah, it depends on when you would have asked me this at different points of the season. I would have a different answer, but I'm actually going to go with someone who probably wouldn't have been considered early on, and that is CeeDee Lamb. I think that if you look at what he did, especially down the stretch, I think he answered all the questions about can he be that number 1 receiver, and I think that he had over 1,300 yards, and I remember the time of season where is he ever going to have a 100-yard game? I don't know when it was before he finally did, but he just really turned it on. I think that he's got a sneaky separation about him. He's not like really fundamentally sound, but he's able to just kind of maneuver in space and then just create space. And I just think, and of course he tracks the ball extremely well. I think that he also too he's a lot tougher than you would think he would be, because I can't tell you how many times where he's taken a shot and I'm like, he's not a very bulky guy. And I'm thinking, well, that's he's not going to get up from that, or he's going to take him a little bit, but no, he's back out there. And I think Lamb is a special player. And to me, I think when I put everything on the table, it's close with some other guys but Lamb gets my vote.
Since you're voting for Lamb in the situation, can you do the first down move that he does with his hand? If you know,
Do I have to?
no,
It's not. It's not my favorite thing to see him do.
that's okay. Tony, offensive player of the year, still the same guy, or are you going a little different?
So I had a couple of contingencies. The guy I'm going to pick is who I think is the answer. But if somebody else said him before me, and this is how it went, I had somebody else in the back burner, and that would have been Zach Martin picking Tony Pollard. I think Tony Pollard is the guy that finally given the chance to make some real things happen in this offense, and he proved himself. This offense is clearly less dynamic without him out there. We saw that in the playoff game, and things really changed for us in a negative way. It's tough that the Cowboys waited till now to kind of really explore that. I'm an Ezekiel Elliott guy, but when the numbers and the disparity in touches is just inexcusable at this point. So he was out there making plays. He was explosive. Every time he touched the football, he felt really good about his chances. He's a physical guy. He's not one of those people that, like, when you see him at first, like, you're like, okay, he's a speed guy. He's gonna get on the edge. But no, he's tough. He's a tough runner. He always falls forward. This team is totally different without Tony Pollard. And hopefully, how you feel about the numbers, if they can make it work with a franchise tag or a contract, whatever the case may be, this team is better with Tony Pollard on it rather than not having him.
Yeah, it's funny how we should have known that he was entering a contract season that he would have his best season. That should have been something that we just assumed going into this year. Howman, is it going to be an offensive lineman? Are you going to give it to the big boys, or are you going to go skill position?
I'm going Dak Prescott for Offensive Player of the Year, and I really don't care what the haters are going to say. Dak Prescott is the most important offensive player on this team. He's the most important player on the whole team because he plays the most important position. He plays it at a very high level. He finished this year. He was 8th in EPA per play. He was 11th in QBR, which puts him firmly in that top 10 conversation. And that was considered a bad year for Dak Prescott. That's what we're talking about with this quarterback, is being right in that top 10 category is considered a down season for him. But I mean, think about what we went through with this offseason a year ago. They get rid of Amari Cooper. They replace him with James Washington, who hardly plays. They draft Jalen Tolbert, who doesn't play. They just completely change this offense. And, half the time, he's going on 3rd and long and trying to convert. And that just doesn't happen at a very high rate. And so they're putting him in tough situations. They're taking away help from him. And then they're surprised when he doesn't play, absolutely out of his mind. And I think to 2 other teams, they got rid of a really talented wide receiver in the offseason. I think of the Titans, and they got rid of A.J. Brown. They missed the playoffs, and they had a losing record, and they fired their general manager during the year. And then the Packers, they got rid of Devontae Adams, and they also missed the playoffs.
And the Chiefs.
Yes, and the Chiefs, and they have the best quarterback in the entire NFL. So they do get that advantage of having Patrick Mahomes. I'm not saying that Dak Prescott is Patrick Mahomes, but Aaron Rodgers has been a really good quarterback. And he just had a terrible season, and now the Packers are talking about potentially trading him, a year after they got rid of his top wide receiver. So Dak went ahead and had a successful season. They made the playoffs. They won a playoff game, and then they ran into a really good defense in San Francisco. To me, he's still one of those quarterbacks that elevates your team, and, one game is not going to sway my opinion of that.
You had it set up perfectly to say players are going to hate, do your little Taylor Swift thing, but you missed out on the opportunity. That's okay. Points just left on the board. Brandon, before we move on, I know Danny had a question. Who do you have as your offensive player of the year?
Man, Loree, I drew the short straw on this one. I mean, all the great options were already picked. I would have gone with CeeDee Lamb or Tony Pollard, but I'm going to stick with CeeDee Lamb. I've talked about it earlier. He came into the year as and he wasn't, some people doubted him as a true number 1 receiver. They were concerned about, how's this whole thing going to play out with Amari Cooper not being in town. To me, it's not even close to me. If you're going to pick a second option, Tony Pollard's a good one. But if you want to go off just raw numbers and just raw stats and just everything that CeeDee Lamb has done for this team, it's not even close to me. And that's why I think part of the reason why they got to 12-5. I think CeeDee Lamb he was a monster. He to me he needs a Robin to him being the Batman on that receiving core. And I think this thing can go to the next level.
Before we move on to totaling the points for tonight, Danny, you had a question you wanted to bring up?
I just want to say quickly, I like everyone's answers except for Howman's, but we meant the fact that Tony Pollard comes up as a offensive MVP. It just kind of, you look at the situation that we're faced with, and you talk about people have their own theories about what they should do with running backs, shouldn't pay them, whatever, blah blah. But could you even imagine a scenario where the Cowboys just decide to just let one of their most explosive offensive players just walk away? And to me, that just I can't imagine that. I don't want to imagine that. And so I don't know. It's just kind of weird. We think about, we're all going to have our opinions about what the Cowboys should do and whatnot. But keep in mind, Tony Pollard was not only Pro Bowl. Tony Pollard was one of the better offensive players in the league. And I just hope the Cowboys don't let that go. That's all.
I think it's a great point, and I know we'll have future episodes talking about free agency, breaking down where the Cowboys players might go or stay, and he's certainly one of them that the Cowboys want to retain. And there was also the tweet posted about the cap numbers for the tags and what you're looking at. I think it was around $10 million for a running back, so not too bad for somebody like a Tony Pollard, and you keep him in the building, recovery. You get to see who he is moving forward. Maybe it's a shortened deal if you want to do a 2-3 year, but that's a great point. And, you were down. It was going to be a 3-way tie, but, for some reason, with all these points that I had and with what everybody said, it's a 4-way tie. So I'm going to throw this last question. I need somebody just really just pull everything they have, put everything into this. I want to know the MVP of the 2022 Cowboys. And it could be somebody that we have already mentioned. You could look at it in a certain way where you're saying value. Who's the most valuable player instead of the best on the team? So I will start with Tony. Going to give it to you. Who do you have as the MVP for the Cowboys?
I mentioned why, and I'll say it again. This team is a totally different football team without Micah Parsons. So for me, it's a clear cut. It's got to be Micah. He's the identity of this team, and he's gonna be for a long time. They're gonna throw the bag at him, and he's gonna get whatever he commands. He deserves it all. And just 2022, 2021, 2023, 2024 are probably gonna say the same thing. We'll cut it back, but for me, it's easy Micah Parsons.
Howman, what about you? Do you have something differing, or are you going to go with the chalk pick?
Brian Anger, obviously. No, I mean, obviously it's Micah Parsons. He is the most valuable player across the whole league. I mean, he does things that no other defender can do, and he just affects the game in such a way that you can't even possibly quantify. Although when you do quantify it, as I mentioned when I talked about him being the defensive player of the year, he still comes out ahead of the whole pack. He doesn't rush the passer every single play. He drops back into coverage. Sometimes he lines up out wide on a receiver or a tight end or a running back. And when he does rush the passer, he looks like he's, one of these guys like Bosa or Garrett, and he's much smaller. He's got shorter arms, and it doesn't matter. He just dominates in everything that he does, and he does it consistently. And he even, forces offensive linemen to jump false start before the ball's even been snapped. And I mean, it's just crazy to think, because back on draft night, there were so many of us, myself included, who did not like the pick. And he's proved everybody wrong time and time again. And I guess you could say that the Cowboys were enchanted to meet him. Got it in there.
Love it. Love it. Just so good. Brandon, for you, I won't throw it to you last this time. MVP, Parsons or anybody else?
Thank you, Loree. I appreciate that. I mean, again, the answer is pretty easy. It's Micah Parsons, but just for the sake of being different, I got to go with CeeDee Lamb. He's top 6 in the league in receptions. I think he's top 5 in the league, top 6 in the league in receiving yards. He's up there in touchdowns. I mean, he's the most dynamic player on offense, and he is the one player on the Cowboys offense, aside from Tony Pollard. But unfortunately for Tony Pollard, he still has the Zeke problem, which that limits the amount of times that he gets the ball, he gets the opportunities. CeeDee Lamb is, to me, every time that ball's in his hands, it's electric, and it's one of those things where there's no other player on offense that I would rather see get the ball in his hands than CeeDee Lamb, and that's my guy.
Danny, I wanted you to go last, not because I wanted to hear everybody else and then just put you off to the side. I always say saving the best for last. That's what I want to hear. I want to hear what you have to say about the MVP, and then we'll total everything. I'm calculating on the side here. So give me something. Give me a passionate take about the MVP for the Cowboys.
Yeah, I'm glad you saved me for last because you know what? I'm not playing for the tie. You know, I'm going to pull a McCarthy. I'm going to call my own play on this one, and I'm going to say that the MVP belongs to Will McClay. And just because of all the things that we've said, and I know this is where you're asking about player, and we know there's only one answer to this, but I just want to talk about what a great job that he's done. All these players that everyone has mentioned, and great answers, by the way. And I mean, it just speaks to what this front office has done. And if there's anything that McCarthy that I praise him for, it's stepping out of the way and letting McClay and company do their job. That we've had some really good drafts, you know, since McCarthy's joined the staff. And to me, I just want to give Will credit because honestly, I don't know where we'd be without him. I mean, we'd be in worse shape. It would because these roster struggles would be there. But no, the Cowboys don't have that. Every year we have younger players that are developing and taking new steps, and that's what gives us hope next season. So, you know, I just definitely we got to give shout out to the guy who's you know, has a big part in the Cowboys' success. So McClay is my most valuable person.
Way to go, just around the question, just do something completely different. I totally appreciate that take because somebody who likes to go and do something in a different direction, that really hits home to me. I have to say though, the winner of my first time hosting the Roundtable is everyone. And I say that because truly everybody is the winner here. You guys have been nothing but fantastic, guiding me through this process. Again, there is no jading here yet. I haven't done this long enough to really develop opinions and biases of everybody that's here. So I'm giving everybody the trophy tonight. But Danny, since your question was the one that sort of brought you into this group with everybody else, I'll throw it to you in honor of RJ. Have somebody, besides myself, of course, do a random noise before we close this out.
You know, I wanted to say, Brandon, you know, first off, RJ's fantastic at doing this. And I really think that you came in and you did a great job. And I also want to say, too, I mean, everybody I love the answers that everybody had. But you know what? I'm really not going to put anybody on the spot. So I don't have a noise for you. I don't know who wants to do it. So, you know, in honor of just a great show by everybody, yeah, no, I'm not going to do it.
Well, that's not the answer I was looking for. But, you know, Tony, since you do have the brick wall behind you, give me a little bit of the brick house by the Commodores.
I don't know it, so you're going to have to give it a Howman.
Anybody, Brandon, you have my back on this one?
I'm not good with this, so I'm going to
pass. I'll do it. I'll do it to close it out because it's only fair.
You got brick too.
The house. She's mighty, just letting it all hang out. She's a brick. Good night, everybody.